Hi, it's Eleanor Beaton, the host of the podcast. If you want to make more money with less overwhelm, then I invite you to consider applying more constraint in terms of how you run your business. Applying constraints means making decisions, cutting off some options to allow other options to flourish. It involves eliminating costly distractions. In this episode, I share 3 ways to bring greater 7-figure constraint to your business so you can scale in a more focused and ease-filled way. Let's go. So here's the question. In a world where the rules of business have been written by men, how do women entrepreneurs like us, women who want to make millions of dollars and impact millions of lives, how do we create enormous success on our terms? That's the question, and this show explores the answers. Welcome to Power Presence Position. I'm your host, Eleanor Beaton, and I'm on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who generate over $1 million per year in annual revenue. I'm an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and leadership coach. I'm a wife, mom of 2 boys, and I'm the CEO of a 7-figure business. Stick around because on this show, you'll learn how to think, communicate, and get paid like a 7-figure CEO. Let's go. For those of you who are non-NBA fans, you might not know that this month of July has been the playoffs for the NBA, the National Basketball Association. And I am just a huge sports fan generally and a big basketball fan specifically. So I've been watching a ton of basketball recently. So I've been watching the playoffs, watching some of the greatest athletes in the world doing incredible feats of athleticism. And what I've been thinking about as I've been watching these incredible world-class athletes entertain us essentially and do incredible things and drive incredible results by virtue of the power of their body and mind and athletic ability is how the constraints in which they operate allow them to create compelling entertainment and actually pull off these incredible athletic feats. So let's think about the game of basketball, okay? So I spent a lot of time watching basketball. It's a huge passion for me. I love watching the incredible things that these athletes are doing. It's super fun. I get into the storylines. And of course, the money just falls off the NBA. You're looking at players who have signed 5-year contracts worth $230 million. There is so much money involved in basketball. It's a huge industry. And when you think about it, at the end of the day, it comes down to some very simple constraints. There's 2 nets. There's 10 players on the floor. The court is about 92 feet by 50 feet. They play for 48 minutes. And inside those constraints, magic happens. The magic always happens because of the constraints we apply, not in spite of them. So when there are no constraints, chaos ensues. I want you to imagine for a moment trying to watch a basketball game where there weren't 2 nets. There were dozens and dozens of nets. There were hundreds of players. There was no actual court. So it wasn't the field of play wouldn't be constrained in 92 feet by 50 feet, but it just could go anywhere it wanted to. You didn't play for 48 minutes. The game just never ended. Without the constraints, chaos would ensue. That game would be completely unruly, be hard to monetize. The athletes wouldn't know when they started, when they ended. Because of that, they might play and play and play with huge injury. You wouldn't see or experience the incredible athletic feats because you wouldn't be able to actually even see it. Chaos ensues when constraints aren't placed. Now, let's think about a country. So I've been watching the news lately and saw the tragedy and the horror of the president of Haiti being murdered in his home. And one of the things that I didn't realize is the degree to which, according to the news stories I had read, Haiti had been slipping into a greater sense of lawlessness in that country. And so when a country begins to slip into a state of lawlessness, chaos ensues in the country and people are not safe. So chaos ensues when leaders and societies don't apply constraints. And when I talk about the term constraint, what I'm really talking about is a thoughtful boundary. Now, there are some constraints that are imposed upon you, and let me give you an example. So I am 6 feet tall, and the shoes that I wear are typically size 10.5 or size 11. So I have a constraint in what shoes are available to me, because my constraint is I can't wear a shoe as much as I love it if it's size 9. It's just not going to happen. It's got to be 10.5 or 11 since I've become a mom. Those of you who have given birth and have had babies, maybe you've experienced your feet got a little bigger. But anyway, there are constraints that are just a part of our reality. And then there are other constraints that we choose. So an example of a constraint that I chose, for instance, is that after, 18 months of being confined to the province of Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada, thanks to COVID, one of the constraints that I am choosing to carry with me moving forward is to really reduce the amount of time that I spend traveling. So pre-COVID, I traveled a ton, probably at least twice per month out of the country to other parts of this country. And I have decided to apply constraint around the amount of time that I travel. Okay. So that's a constraint that I have chosen in order to honor a part of my life that I want to have flourish. And that part of my life that I want to have flourish is the part that, I'm a mom to a preteen and a teenager. And I'm finding as they're getting older that it's becoming increasingly important for me, and I want to be more present just to be with them. It's just this thing that I'm feeling. And so that's in order to allow that family part of my life to flourish in the way that I want it to flourish. There are other constraints that I'm applying in other parts of my life to allow that to happen. So applying constraints is a fundamental step in creating the conditions for other things that you value to flourish. I can remember that a dear friend of mine who owns a big farm, basically, and has grown up around apple trees and plum trees and all of this, she gave me for my birthday one year an apple tree. And so she brought the apple tree to me and she kind of was giving it to me. And she said, if you really want it to be successful, you better prune it. And so I was like, okay, great. So how do you prune it? How do you prune a baby apple tree? And I was thinking, so the apple tree was about, I would say it was about sort of shoulder height when she gave it to me. And I was thinking that she was going to say, well, just trim a couple of inches off each of the branches. But she said, when we prune our trees, we cut them right down. And so it was aggressive. Let's put it that way. The way that she was encouraging me to prune the tree was to really prune it back aggressively. And I was just really shocked and surprised, but she was the expert. And so I pruned it the way that she told me to prune it. I felt like I was murdering the tree. But lo and behold, that tree grew and grew and produced beautiful blossoms and incredible fruit the rest of the years that we lived in that house. So that's an analogy of how applying constraint, i.e., pruning your life, your business, is an act of love And we do it in order to have other parts of our business flourish. And I think it's something that we know intellectually, but that a lot of times we're not actually putting into practice. If you want to scale your company, applying constraints is a fundamental step of how you would do that. And when you have a company that you can scale, where you have been intentional about what constraints you're going to put in place, then you have a cash machine that can build wealth, can impact thousands of people, and can grow well beyond you. Now, on this show before, I have talked about building a premium price ascension model business. A PAM business is what we call it. And you can go back and look at the episodes. It's a 2-part episode where I talk about building a PAM business. And I really encourage you to check it out if you haven't listened to that before. But what the case that I make there and what I really teach and encourage many of my clients and students to think about is to apply constraint in their offers. So what I recommend is that you have no more than 3 offers in your business. A core offer, and what I would call sort of initial high touch 5-figure offer. So for many of you, this is going to be the service offering, sort of a premium service offering that you systematize and create yourself. We help you do this in the Power Presence Position Business Accelerator. So this is key because it means that rather than offering up, like continuously tailoring your service or your packages or your programs to whatever your clients want them to be, you apply a layer of constraint and you say, no, this is what the offer is. I'm going to work on this with you. It's a premium high touch offer. I'll be there by your side to deliver this, but we're applying constraint and this is my offer to you. And then from there, you can potentially upsell those clients that you want to make an invitation to into your next offer, right? So that's what a premium price ascension model is. But my point in sort of explaining that model is that the art of applying constraint allows you to grow and each part of your business model, your core offer, your back-end offer, each part of that business model is given the space and attention and resources they need to flourish. If you are continuously selling all kinds of different packages and programs to all kinds of different people, nothing gets the attention it needs to flourish. You haven't pruned your apple tree, right? You're just letting it grow wild, and so it can't ever produce really good fruit. In episode 452 of this podcast, it's called 7-Figure Niching Secrets. I really encourage you to go back and listen to that one too if you haven't heard it yet. I took a deep dive into how applying constraints helped Steve Jobs bring Apple back from the brink of bankruptcy to become the world's most valuable company. And not only a valuable company, but to be honest, Apple is a cultural icon today. And I also shared my own journey of applying constraints. So you definitely want to go and check out 7-Figure Niching Secrets, where I dive deeper into one way, i.e. niching down as a way to apply constraint in your business. And what I always find so ironic is that in order to grow bigger than you need to start with constraints. Applying constraints is about making decisions, cutting off options, choosing what works for you and what won't work for you. So for the rest of this episode, I'm going to share 3 main sources of constraints that you can think about and be intentional about in order to prune your business so that the right things can flourish. And for me, when I think about the things that I'd love to help you make flourish, it's CIA, baby, cash, influence, and autonomy. So you can constrain based on your life. You can constrain based on your magic or your zone of genius. And you can also constrain based on your who. By the end of this episode, you're going to have some really clear steps on where to apply constraint so you can grow faster than you have before. But also, it's not just about being fast. It's about really appreciating and relishing and having that journey not be easy. I think that's going to be overstating it, right? It's not that it's easy, but it's that it's a clean, uncluttered, efficient journey. So let's dive in. All right, so let's talk about constraining based on your life. What that means is that you begin to apply constraints in your business based on your life preferences. So I prefaced this at the top of this episode. I talked about how, COVID has really changed my relationship to travel. My boys are getting older, and I am in a phase in my life where I just want to be around them. I mean, I'm a good parent for older kids. I want to hang out with them. I want to know their friends. I want to talk with them. I want to see their faces. I just don't want to be away right now. And so that's a constraint, that anything that requires me to be away is not going to be effective. So by not traveling, that constrained my lead generation options. Okay, so I used to do a lot of lead generation by just being present at conferences and speaking live at conferences. And that meant I had to travel because there's not a lot of great conferences where I'm from, so where I live. So that becomes a constraint that informs the strategy of my marketing strategy, which basically then becomes much more about virtual or digital marketing, right? So the move away from in-person marketing and focusing much more exclusively on digital marketing. All right. So that's an example of a constraint. Other constraints could look different. Let's say that you're a night owl. Maybe that means that you don't book any meetings prior to 12 o'clock noon. I have a friend who's highly sensitive, and she works with highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And one of the constraints that she has is a need for natural light. And so she'll never hold a conference or an event in any conference room that doesn't have plenty of natural light. See, really cool. I have a colleague who loves to travel, adores traveling. He's a rolling stone. And so he set up his business so that he could RV for a year. There are other people in my community who, for instance, one of our incubator clients who has 3 kids and doesn't really want to work more than a 3 to 4 hour workday. So she's super focused in that time, but she is constraining her business so that it can run and be lucrative and have an impact in 3 hours a day. All right. So these are all different examples of applying constraints in your business based on your life. So when you get this right, you end up building a business that is sustainable because it suits you. It's custom made for you, not for somebody else, for you. And when you have a business that you decide and intentionally decide to custom make for you, that becomes a business that you don't resent. It becomes a business that you love. It's interesting. I've noticed, in working with clients, that when they don't apply constraints, they begin to resent the impact that growing their business has on their life. And I have been there, okay, in insidious ways. So I can remember I was doing a particular sort of launching style in my business that wasn't suited to my energy level and my preferences. And it was unsustainable. And I started to really resent the process of launching, which turned into resenting the process, oddly, of inviting new clients into my programming, right? And so I sort of had to catch myself and realize, no, I have clear life constraints. And so those life constraints are preferences based on my energy and how I like to schedule my time and how I like to show up and structure things. So that would be an example. Everybody's life constraints, your preferences are different. So when you set up a business, that when you're clear and honest with yourself about your constraints and set your business up to work with your constraints, you are never at a crossroads with growth, right? Growth becomes something that supports and is supported by your life preferences. And so growth becomes truly a really good thing. Is growth uncomfortable? Does it mean it's not challenging? No, none of those things. Come on. We're grown-ups here. We understand that running a business is work, that there's a lot of it that's hard and challenging. You're going to do things that you don't want to do. So that's why it's so important to be really intentional about the constraints that you put on so that you're doing the best you can to make sure your business is custom made for you. This is what doesn't happen. I also see people get it twisted and think by applying these constraints, business is going to be easy and totally effortless. It's going to be more ease-filled than setting up a business. Like if you're a night owl and setting up your meetings so that you're starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, right? That's not going to work. That's just going to be way too hard. But when you structure a business according to your preferences and constraints, it makes the business, certainly the growth of that business, much more ease-filled. All right. So the question, when you get it wrong, when you don't constrain based on your preferences and your life choices, what I see entrepreneurs doing is you start using your constraints as a reason not to grow. And I've seen this so many times. I was telling you about this client who is a mom of 3, really values having time, and wants to work 3 hours a day. You know what never comes out of her mouth? That's a reason to not make money, that she needs to quote unquote keep her business small, or other mistaken, erroneous, or weak-minded attitudes to constraints. All right. That's not the case. She sees this as a constraint that she needs to think about and plan for and brainstorm around so that she can have the business that she wants while honoring the constraints of her life. Okay? So my question to you are, what are 3 constraints that are really important to you right now? 3 things that are really, really important to you. So an example for me would be, one constraint is that I don't want to have any organized meetings or anything like that on Fridays. I want to have my Fridays completely open because in order to do what I want to do, I need to have time, open, unscheduled, totally blocked off to access time to think and dream. Right? I have to fill the well in order to be able to do the volume of creation that I do in this business that I've created, right? Second constraint, I have to be able to create. Third constraint, I don't want to travel. Okay, so think about what this means for you. And what I will say is your business grows and evolves, those constraints can become tighter and tighter, and they allow greater and greater flourishing. So you keep pruning harder, and that allows greater fruits of your labor and more flourishing. Okay, so let's talk about the next category of constraint. All right, so let's talk about constraining based on your zone of genius or your magic. And what this means is cutting off options or subtracting offerings that are outside your zone of genius. There's different names for this. Zone of genius, sometimes it's called unique ability. Thought leaders have different names for this. But at the end of the day, it's really about, what is your company amazing at? What can you do? What do you do that is effortless? How can you do only that, right? How can you focus on only that? So many of you want to be original, but then I've sometimes noticed that you start to feel pressure to be like everyone in your industry. Apple didn't try to compete with its competitors on their terms. So when Apple was on its rise, its competitors were releasing dozens and dozens of different types of products. Apple didn't compete there. What they were insanely good at was keeping things really simple, keeping the design, but also the world of their business really clean and uncluttered. So they didn't try to add in tons of different choices and products. They were like, our magic is being insanely simple. So we're going to focus on amazing design, simple user interface, and basically running an uncluttered company, right? So that's an example of them applying constraint around their zone of genius. And P.S., I've done another episode called Zone of Genius Discipline. You might want to go check that one out too. All right. I work with a client who is an amazing writer and speaker, but she doesn't like facilitating groups. She just finds that exhausting. And so she kept feeling the pressure from her industry. There was like this model of what quote unquote high ticket programs need to look like that included group facilitation, the leader facilitating group calls. And she had no idea. She had no desire to do this. She didn't like working with people in that way. And so she decided that she was going to build her offer around writing and speaking, and she just wasn't going to have group calls. It was just not something that she was going to do. And I hear you saying, but Eleanor, couldn't she have hired somebody else to do it? You're missing the point. You don't get out of building your business and then just getting other people to do things that aren't in your zone of genius. I think that's a design flaw, So let me give you an example. If Steve Jobs had said, you know what, my preference is for insanely simple, but I know that a lot of people out there expect lots of different types of phones. So I'm just going to hire a team to design all those other phones, and I'm going to stay focused on my team with this type of phone. No, that is a complete lack of vision. So when people talk about, well, why don't you just hire people to do all the things that aren't in your zone of genius? I'm like, don't take that too far. Stop shoehorning shit into your business because you think the industry demands it, and start shoehorning things into your business and then hiring people to do those things that you're shoehorning in there that have no business being there in the first place because it's not your zone of genius and it also isn't your worldview of how things need to be, right? I.e., this client who loves writing and speaking and so has built her high-ticket program around that. She doesn't like facilitating groups. And so it's not like she's going to muddy her vision by getting someone else to come in and facilitate groups. She's just cutting that out completely, i.e., innovating. It's called innovation. I wish everybody would try it sometimes. So my question for you is, what's your magic? What's your zone of genius? And where are you not pruning your business right now? What are you hanging on to because it's an industry standard, because you think everybody wants it, because everybody's doing it that way? And so, i.e., leading like a follower, rather than getting really clear, even if it's just in the planning stage, you don't need to cut or stop doing anything. I'm just asking you to be aware, right? What is your quote unquote unique ability? What is your company's zone of genius? And how can you be a disciple of that rather than being a jack of all trades of all the bobs and whistles that you quote unquote need, because that's the quote unquote industry standard. I think you can tell my contempt for this method of growth and quote unquote leadership, right? So where can you over-re-up and constrain based on your zone of genius, constrained based on your unique magic, and create something that is truly powerful and beautiful and has a strong brand based on that? Okay? So the question here, really to help you think about this, is what are 3 places where you are feeling pressure to conform because that's how it's done? Now, here's the thing, I find that this is such a powerful area for differentiation that because of peer pressure and groupthink, people don't implement. Let me give you an example. I run a high-ticket program, 2 high-ticket programs, and there's so much pressure to have a Facebook group, and for years I just felt all this pressure to have a bloody Facebook group. And I didn't want it. I didn't want to have it. It's not my zone of genius, monitoring Facebook groups. But Eleanor, you could get somebody else to monitor a Facebook group for you. And that's certainly something that I briefly considered. But I was also like, this isn't a reflection of my worldview. What I want to create is a program where really intelligent, smart women come together for thoughtfully and, heart-centered, powerful facilitation of dialogue and conversation. That's what I'm here to do. That's my worldview. So I'm not going to cave to pressure because everybody and their dog who runs a high-ticket program has a bloody Facebook group. And P.S., if you have a bloody Facebook group, this is not a criticism on you because that's your business, your constraints, your zone of magic, all of that good stuff. What I'm saying is it's really easy to cave to pressure when, in order to create something that is distinct and that is you, I think that the world doesn't need another person trying to cave to industry pressure. What the world needs right now are powerful women leaders who are clear on what they're bringing to the world, and they have the guts, ovaries, and discipline to create that. Okay? So that's just an example. So what are 3 places where you're feeling pressure to conform? Because that's how it's done. From my perspective, when I realized that having these discussion forums, sure, that is not my zone of genius. I don't want it. And I'm never going to bring something into the world of my business that I'm not 100% all in and with, right? I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do something that is unique and that brings unique value. And that's the only way to show up, right? So I'm just sort of giving you an example of leading your business from this way and how sometimes it's challenging, sometimes it's difficult, but is there any other option? If you really want to create something that is original and unique and a product of your own expression. All right. So there you go. Constraining based on your zone of genius. Let's transition to the final category for constraint. Okay, the final constraint is constraining based on your who. And what I mean here is cutting off all but the most ideal customers. So this is a really powerful and interesting mindset shift. People talk a lot, about having your ideal clients and all of that. And that's all good. But I don't think people really take it seriously. It's kind of like having an ideal client is like a general sense. And that's, in fairness, how we start. That's how I started. I had a general sense of who my ideal client was, but I didn't have that conviction or commitment to talk to her and only her. I chickened out a lot. And I felt that if I really talked directly to her, I would be cutting off too many options. I'd be alienating too many people, that my business wouldn't grow. And, in fairness, that, my ability to do that now much more rigorously is certainly a function of the maturation process for entrepreneurs. But I also don't think that is an excuse. And I think that the sooner, once you know who that client is, really, really being dedicated to that client. Again, I have a previous episode on committing to an audience. Go check it out for an in-depth exploration of this. In the Power Presence Position Business Accelerator, which is my coaching program, we teach a concept called the most valuable buyer. And when you know how to identify who your most valuable buyer is and then only work with them, your business changes. And one of the things that I've noticed is that what it really changes is the energy of you and your team. And so the energy goes from this place of, do you want to work with me? Do you want to buy my program? Do you want to buy my stuff? And that level of neediness is repellent, by the way, to great clients. You go from there to, okay, we're clear on who we want to work with. Let's have a conversation and see if we're a fit, right? You can see that energy is so much different. It's a much more clear and powerful energy. And results always flow to a place of great clarity. We kicked off this podcast talking about how a lack of constraint breeds chaos. And money loves order. Money loves order, and smart people love to, and they understand the power of stepping into an orderly world. And so really constraining your business to serve only your most lucrative clients. And you will find that very often, if you haven't done this, there is a small percentage of your clients who are producing most of the revenue in your business. And what I'm suggesting is that you have discipline and constrain your business to focus on them and only them. Too many of you are tolerating less than ideal customers. And if you do high ticket transformational work, transformational consulting or coaching or service delivery, a less than ideal customer will disrupt your business and make it so much harder. So when you get it right and you work only with your ideal business, your ideal client, your businesses, it becomes easier to scale. And again, when I talk about businesses being easier to scale, I'm not doing the whole scale with total ease, scale without breaking a sweat. No, there's a time for action and effort for sure. And there is work involved, my friends. You're going to put in some work. You're going to experience difficult challenges. That's normal. But I'm saying that you're not piling suffering on top of that, the suffering of having to tolerate people who are not a good fit and having them tolerate you. Because if they're not a good fit for you, you're probably not good for them either. So when you get it right, your business becomes much easier to scale when you work only with your most valuable buyers. When you get it wrong, you just have a lot of drama and bad energy in the business, right? So let's really create constraints around who you are working with. I really encourage you to cultivate the courage to walk away from the okay in order to get the great. And so you need to ask yourself, who is your perfect customer? Like name names. In my coaching, I often ask people, tell me the first name of your best customer. Don't give me some BS generic, example. Name names, right? Who are you tolerating? Who isn't that? Why are you tolerating? And what is one action you can take to declutter your business of non-ideal clients, right? Can you wrap up contracts and not take any more? Can you implement some kind of rule, about how you're going to qualify clients to make sure they're a really good fit? Let me give you an example. When I first started selling high ticket programs, what I noticed is that sometimes, especially if I had a live event and I made an offer, on occasion, someone would apply for the program, not because they really wanted to be in it, but because they had FOMO. They had this fear. And at first I didn't recognize this, right? So this is an experience thing and hopefully you can learn from it. But I learned to be able to identify when it was FOMO and when it was actual desire to get the transformation to work closely with you. And I started saying no and unselling the people who had FOMO or who were buying because of FOMO. And it wasn't because I was trying to block money or I didn't like money, but I only want clean money moving through my business. Money that is handed over from somebody who is truly an ideal fit, who truly wants the result of the work that we do together. That is called clean money. And the more you fill your business with clean money, the faster you grow, right? The better the energy of that growth too. And clean money comes from most valuable buyers. All right. So there's some wisdom for you. So there you have it. I hope this was useful to you. 3 approaches to declutter your business and to grow with greater focus and ease by applying 7-figure constraint. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I would so appreciate if you would take the time to leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify. I so appreciate you guys for taking the time to leave us a review. It brings so much joy to my heart to read your words. And in fact, I want to highlight a listener right now. All right. So thank you to Ramona TS, who gave us a 5-star review on iTunes. She says, love this podcast. Eleanor has been inspiring me through this podcast week by week for the last couple years. As an entrepreneur with a growing business, her topics get me thinking, her conviction feels motivating, and her communication skills are inspiring. I truly love this podcast and Eleanor's work. Thank you so much, Ramona, for taking the time to leave us that review. I so appreciate it. Hey, you're still here. Amazing. All right, let me tell you what's coming up in my world and the world of our company, Safi Media. So I'm going to be releasing a short course this September. It's a short course and live workshop and combined. And speaking of constraint and pruning, it's all about how you can scale your company working 1 power hour a day. All right, so this doesn't mean only working an hour a day. It means working 1 power hour a day. What's a power hour? A power hour is a full hour that you spend devoted to a $10,000 per hour task. Okay. So in business, there are $100 tasks, $1,000 tasks, $10,000 tasks, $100,000 tasks. In September, I'll be leading a workshop called the 10K Hour. We're going to be really helping you catapult growth by identifying what your $10,000 per hour tasks are and really redesigning and reimagining how you use your time and where you put your company resources so you can maximize the amount of time that you spend in your $10,000 hour tasks. Okay. So seating is extremely limited. We will only make space for 50 people. So you should definitely get on the wait list so that when we release details about it, you'll have them. So you can get access to the wait list, but also I have some incredible resources where I actually share with you what my top $10,000 per hour tasks are. So you can go to the10khour.com. So it's the number 10, letter K, hour, OUHR.com, the10khour.com. Go there, sign up for the wait list, get the goodies, and I'll be back at you in your mailbox with more details about the workshop. All right. Thanks so much for being here. It was so awesome to connect with you again. I can't wait to be back here with you next week.